to me, like that is the calling as an investor. As a person that does like care about hungry people, I like the idea that we can feed a lot of people this way. And I say this a lot, and it's the result of capitalism being a catalyst for change. You know, it's very easy to blame capitalism for the world's problems, but I can look at capitalism as a solution to a lot of problems. And God, this is like such a great example.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Angel Research Podcast. I am, again, Sarah, the most favorite host, filling in for Jason Stutman. This week we have Jeff Siegel visiting, and he is going to be our guest. He has been here with Angel for quite some time now, has discovered a lot of cool investment opportunities, has made his subscribers a lot of money. Jeff, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be here today.
My pleasure.
Honestly, let's just get straight to it. What right now are you most bullish on?
You're just getting right to it, right?
Yep.
Like, I just want to make some money, tell me what I should be looking at.
I know, I don't get to see you much. I'm like, just tell me what's on. I want to pick your brain.
You don't know how I'm feeling, how my family is, just tell me how to make money.
Yes.
No, that's fine. That's what they pay me for. No, that's fine. Actually, I would love to talk to you about food tech. I am very, very, very bullish on food tech right now. And I actually have my computer open because I want to share with you a quote from this guy. His name's Daniel Brody. I'm sorry. He's the co-founder of Eat Well Group, which actually is a public company. He says, "We cannot grow from 7 to 10 billion people by 2050 and feed everyone the same way. It's mathematically impossible. We need more sustainable alternatives." And there is a mountain of truth in that for a number of reasons. First of all, just population growth in general. It is significantly difficult to produce food the way we produce it in the United States and other parts of the world, basically because of resources that we have here that maybe you don't have in India or certain parts of Africa. But the big point that I want to just jump right into is, how do we produce enough food for a growing population in a post-carbon world? We know that there has been a continuance of extreme weather events especially over the past 5 or 6 years, and this is not going to stop. It's going to get worse based on the data. I'm not just throwing this out, to talk about climate change. I have no interest in talking about climate change, quite frankly, because I know, people have their own viewpoints on whether or not the data is sound, or if it's not. I don't care. What is sound is the data that shows we are seeing a continuance of these extreme weather events. What you want to attribute that to, I don't care. We're here to make money, and I see a crisis and an opportunity, and that's how we make money. So we can look back to this summer, where we had cattle in large numbers
dying, right?
Just
Yeah, I was going to say,
dead.
I saw some videos like that, and I'm like, this looks like a movie, like a scary movie scene or something.
It was nasty.
Yeah.
It was nasty. And it was a result of drought conditions, extreme heat conditions that in those regions, specifically in Missouri at the time, that they're not common. So a lot of the cattle ranchers were kind of left at a loss. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't do anything. They didn't have the water. It was too hot to take care of the cows, and they died. This is not something that is a one-time event. This is going to continue to happen. And on a larger scale, if we look at the way we produce meat, specifically in this country on an industrial scale, it's all centralized. Like thousands upon thousands of cows in a concentrated animal feedlot. If you get one really bad drought or one really bad heat wave, you're done. You lose everything. If I were, and we hear this a lot from farmers, like small farmers that have a small herd. Something goes bad, they're out of business. But industrial feedlots have always been able to, because they're so large, they've always been able to weather the storm. That's changing now, okay? Yeah. Because you're not only talking about the effect that, and again, I'm just going to focus on cows here, that heat or drought will have on the health of those cows, but how do we feed those cows? In an industrial scenario, which we use today, we primarily feed cows soy and corn. Well, if you're having extreme heat conditions, extreme drought, flooding, the price of those commodities soar. So it makes it more expensive for these meat producers to grow and produce and process this meat, which is why when people go to the store, they say, oh, the price of steak is so expensive. The price of ground beef is so expensive. And you can blame any number of things. I mean, inflation is a great way to look at a way to
just lump it all into like a whole kind of thing. Yeah.
It's a completely valid argument. But an even more valid argument is the fact that it's simply going to be more expensive to produce meat when we have to deal with these extreme weather conditions. And again, this is not stopping. So to me, I'm looking at this as okay, this is absolutely a crisis situation because the price of food is going to continue to go up. Now, for us, we can go to the grocery store and say, oh, crap, it's going to cost me an extra dollar to buy a pound of ground beef. But in other parts of the world where these extreme weather conditions are much worse, resource availability is not what it is here, it becomes a life or death situation.
Yeah.
We see it's interesting in developing nations, there has been an increase in demand for meat protein, specifically like in India, China, parts of Africa. And this is just the result of an increase in wealth. The more wealth you have, the more demand goes up for meat protein. Again, this is not me just waxing poetic. This is data. We look at the data, and this is what it shows. And this has been consistent over the past 20 years. So, what do we do when, again, we have these extreme weather conditions happening, and they're happening in places where resource availability is already pretty limited? Again, India, parts of Africa, parts of China. It creates a very real problem in terms of feeding this growing population. We, as Daniel said, we cannot continue to feed the world the way we do it now because the math doesn't add up.
Yeah, I mean, it's already not adding up like now. I mean, like different places in the world already have like food crises as it is. So like if you're completely wiping out one of their main sources, like it's only going to get worse. So.
It's absolutely going to get worse. So what do we do? There are a lot of people that have come out, specifically investors and analysts will say, well, we need to create more concentrated animal feedlots so we can have, it's almost the idea that like the idea is the more is better. Well, if we have, we distribute this stuff. So maybe in Idaho, there's a really bad drought and it just affects that region. So, but it's okay because in Texas, we have another animal feedlot that has the same amount of cows or pigs or whatever, and we'll make up for it. But that doesn't work. And you can ask, any of the companies that like Cargill, ADM, like they don't want to keep doing this. They can't afford to keep doing this. It becomes, really squeezes the margins, and that's going to continue to happen. So what I do is when I first noticed this crisis, I figured, okay, well, who are the best people to talk to know how to fix it? And full disclosure, I've never, apologized for being an environmentalist. A lot of this does for me have to do with how do we produce food in an environmentally sustainable way. But this is all economics at this point. So what I do is I go and I talk to the guys at Cargill. I talk to the guys at ADM, Tyson Foods, Yum Brands. Okay, I talk to these guys and I just kind of pick their brains. Like, how are you dealing with this? Because I know they're paying attention, and they are. And they're all very, very heavily invested in alternatives in food tech. So what I'll talk to you about a little bit is what they're investing in, because I guarantee you what Cargill is investing in now, that type of food production, or ADM or Yum, any of these companies, that's what we're going to be eating in 30 years. Because they provide the food, they know how to do it in a way that's going to make their shareholders money. So there are three things that I'm very focused on right now. And the one that I'm really, really excited is cultured meat. And I don't want you to freak out when I say cultured meat, because sometimes it's also called lab-grown meat. And people have this idea of petri dishes and, like kind of this futuristic, toxic environment. It's very, very simple to explain. Instead of growing meat in a cow, let's say beef, in a cow, we're growing it in a lab. All we're doing is taking the same cell structures and we're putting it in a lab to grow the cell structures in a lab to make meat. This is happening right now. We've been doing it for a long time. It was very expensive to do it because you're talking about really creating life in a lab.
Exactly. For one, like creating the lab in the first place to make sure it can actually build all this stuff, and like I'm assuming it has a bunch of precautions and everything.
Oh yeah, it's a very like sterile environment. It's definitely an environment too. Like I've been to a few labs, and there are a lot of protocols that I have to go through just to get in there, because a lot of the stuff is IP. The IP is very valuable, so they're very cautious in like what they let people see. But the easiest way to explain it is, again, instead of growing meat on a farm in a cow. Okay, all we're going to do is we're going to take the same cells that exist in that cow to make the muscle, and we're going to put them in a lab and do the same exact thing. The end result is you get meat, just like you get meat from I'll say the old-fashioned way. Okay, because eventually it will be the old-fashioned way.
Okay, real quick, you say
Mhm.
getting cells from one of the cows, like how exactly so they still would have to have a farm, or is it something they can just kind of one and done kind of thing? Like go get a cow, take some cells and it's like okay, or
Pretty much, yeah. You take
oh.
the cells, then you can reproduce the cells in a lab for many years.
Oh, nice.
You're not really hurting the cow unless the cow's like, "Don't give me a shot," you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
And
that.
honestly, like going to one cow is again like better than it being like a huge farm of like thousands of cows that are all just like squished together.
Well,
I
I
would
mean,
assume.
again, look at it from the standpoint of a company that's trying to make money selling you beef. You know, how much money does it cost to maintain a concentrated animal feedlot that is literally miles and miles and miles wide? Just the insurance on that alone can be cost prohibitive, especially again as we go into a post-carbon world where you're going to see more of these extreme weather events. The very interesting thing to me, though, about cultured meat and making meat in a lab is it uses about 95% less water than we use now to grow meat in a cow. And again, as extreme weather events happen, that affects our water availability. We see that happening in the West right now with the Colorado River. And this is not going away. This is going to continue to be a problem. And also in terms of land use, you cut your land use down by about 75, 80%.
Oh, nice.
So we're already talking about how can we most efficiently create meat. But the really exciting part about this is if you look at the curve of the cost to produce this meat, okay, say 10 years ago, it's tens of thousands of dollars to produce a lab-based hamburger. Okay, today it'll cost about $35 to $45. Now that's a lot of money. You're not going to spend $35 to $45 on a hamburger, but look at that cost curve decline.
Yeah, I was gonna
in
say
10 years, going from tens of thousands of dollars to $30, $40.
yeah, just like yeah, exactly. Just 30 or 40 would still, like you said, to this day, like not an average Joe is just gonna go like every day I go get my $40 burger from wherever. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, especially if it drops that much in like just a couple of years, I could see that being a huge change. And I would assume it would be in like normal grocery stores and like I guess restaurants and everything too. And
So we're already seeing there are some restaurants that do serve the cell-based meat. I mean, they're high-end restaurants because it's still very expensive. In Singapore, there's a restaurant that serves a cell-based chicken. But the interesting thing is if you look at tens of thousands of dollars to $30, $40 in just, let's say, 10 years, in another 10 years, not only is this food most likely going to be competitive with conventionally grown meat, it's going to be cheaper. Now, you have to think about that for a second. Again, going back to like Cargill, ADM, like the big meat producers and the big ag companies, they're not in business to it's not an altruistic endeavor. They're there to make money. They're there to make their shareholders money. So if I'm running that company and someone says to me, look, I can help you produce the same amount of meat you're producing now using less resources, and it's gonna be cheaper to produce it this way. Why wouldn't you?
true, you'd think that all signs point to yes, but I mean, would you think like does it taste different? Because I can see some people being like, oh no, like it has different texture, or I don't want like I want things to be. I mean, like also if it does get to the point of the original burgers kind of being way more expensive, like that being now the $40, $50, $100 burger. But I could see some people still giving some pushback.
There's definitely a valid argument to that. So we're still, and I really want to make this very clear, we're still like in the earliest stages here. So the data that I have seen, and just like anecdotally, like watching chefs, for instance, try this meat and giving their thoughts, because the best people to ask are chefs. They can tell you like if the texture is right, if the flavor is right, if the fat content is right, that kind of thing. And it's not perfect. We're not at that place where it's like, yes, this tastes exactly like
You're like
a piece
blindfold
of
me,
chicken.
which ones? No one will know the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's pretty damn close.
Dang.
And so, and we will be there. It's just like, it's like any technology. If you think like the very first cell phone I had was like the one in the car. There was like this, it was like a briefcase and you plugged it into your cigarette lighter and, you had to pay like per minute,
True.
and
Or
it
just
was,
like, yeah, TVs, computers, like would be super chunky. And now look, this is literally like smaller than.
and this is an old computer.
Yeah.
This is like a 10-year-old computer.
Yeah, but prime example, like when just like the monitor itself would like take up this entire half the table.
Right.
So.
Well, okay, look, here's this computer right here.
Yeah.
Okay? This is a computer. I can do pretty much anything on it, and compare that to where we were just 30 years ago or even 20 years ago when you did have to pay like per minute and they were big and clunky and you couldn't go online, any of that stuff.
Yeah, if you're trying to call from your home but you're online, you're like, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you can't
Yeah,
even give a home. Yeah, you can't
right.
even answer the home phone. 'Cause
The
you're
old
like,
days, the phone modem days. So, okay, so that's a really good way to look at it. So, like, let's look at culture and meat. Like, right now, we're in the phone modem days. Okay? We're still using the modem. We're still doing dial-up. We're not at 2400 baud anymore. We're probably like 5600. So we're getting there. You're almost
Close,
to the T1
close, yeah.
lines. We're getting there. But that's the best time to be an investor because it's like it's like with anything. It's like you don't buy shares of a company once it's already huge and expect to make a ton of money. And we can talk about EVs later, but Tesla has always been one of my favorite examples. Is when before Tesla was even public, I was writing about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember, you mentioned Tesla, before it was even like public.
Yeah,
or something. Yeah.
And I
cool.
told people, like, listen, this is the time to buy because no one's paying attention, and there's a lot of pushback because a lot of pushback is coming from people that don't understand the market and don't understand the value proposition. And that's when we went in. Of course, we made a ton of money from that.
I mean, if I bought Tesla back before it was public,
You bought it before it was public?
Yeah, I know. I was gonna be like, not before it's public. Exactly, like back. Yeah,
Right.
I would probably be on an island somewhere.
Right,
Yeah,
I know,
like, oh
right?
my gosh.
So that's the point. So when I talk about these things, it's, yes, it's early stages. So there are issues potentially with, does it taste exactly like meat yet? Is the texture right? No, it's not. Is it still expensive? Yes, it is. But it's like with anything. It's not always going to be that way. And that's why I'm so focused on it right now. Because, again, this is a crisis versus opportunity scenario. It's bottom line, we have to find a better way to produce food, specifically meat. And this is will be the most efficient, effective, price competitive way to do it. So some of the pushback that I've seen from people when I talk about it, the first response is there's no way I'm eating frankenfood, like something that's created in a lab. And, it's a fair assessment because when we think about food, like if you look at food commercials, you don't see concentrated animal feedlots.
Yeah.
You see like this fake farmer out with his really pretty cow that has no mud on its feet because it's not a real farm. It's not a real farmer. And I say this because I work with farmers in upstate New York and I get almost all my food from a farm. So I know how real farms operate and those aren't real farms. But it's the perception of what we do. And I also would push back against some people who eat, if you go to a restaurant, specifically a fast food restaurant, they say, well, I don't want to eat, this food made in a lab. Well, what do you think you're eating now? If you eat a burger from McDonald's, it's not like, there's some little bit of beef in there, but it's mostly corn and soy, and it's produced not in a sterile lab environment, but it's produced in an industrial setting with lots of machines and robots and things, and we eat that, and that's actually quite unhealthy too. The interesting thing about cultured meat that I also really like is this is designer meat. So you can make it any way you want. So say, for example, you have heart disease and you don't eat red meat because of the fat content. In a cellular culture world, in a cultivated meat culture world, we can actually produce a steak that has less saturated fat, and it'll still taste like a steak. It'll still be juicy. You cook it like any other, steak, and you don't have to worry about the health concerns with that. It's designer meat. This is the future. This is what I'm saying. And people are it's hard to wrap your head around things that you haven't seen yet, and I understand that. But then again, it's like, do you want to make a 10x return, a 20x return, or do you want to make, a 10% return? I'm not judging. Do whatever makes you happy. But I've been very, very successful over the last 20 years in this business, and my biggest successes have always come from getting in early on new technologies. And this is, for me, this is the next electric vehicle situation. This is the next biotech. This is huge.
No, that makes sense, especially like you said, the option of being able to be specifically curated for people, especially with health issues. And like another thing, I'm assuming since it's not actually from a cow, it would be like kind of considered vegetarian in a way. Like I don't know if that's something because like that's a huge
Right.
reason why a lot of people don't eat meat is like for the animal cruelty aspect and like whether like, I know you said that they have to get the cells from an animal in the first
Hmm.
place, but like I don't know if like people would be like, oh, I'd be more willing to eat from these meat producers who only had to get cells from a cow once tens of years ago when they first had to do it because he said that they can just keep producing it.
Right.
So I could see that being like a whole game changer too for
It
like I mean, I don't know.
Well, it is. So it's interesting because if you look at the data, there actually has been an increase in like meatless burgers or like vegetarian-based meats, or just there has been an increase in actually vegetarian and vegan consumers. We are seeing even omnivores are eating more plant-based foods with their meat. I mean, that again, I'm not just talking out of my ass here. I mean, this is what the data shows us. So there is that move. Now, I would caution against saying that yes, this is completely vegan, because yes, you can take the cell. You're not going to harm the animal by taking the cell out of the animal and then reproducing those cells in a lab. But there is at this point, in order to grow the meat, you need like a growth serum, which does actually come from a calf right now. So yes, there are animals still being killed to make this. But here's the interesting thing about that too. Again, whenever there's a situation where like we can do it better, this is it, because the most expensive part of making a cell-based piece of meat is the growth serum, which again comes from a calf. So there are a number of companies that are trying to develop synthetic versions
Because
of
they already
this.
trying to find a cheaper version. They're like,
Right.
okay, let's cut down costs even more. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So it's not about like I don't want to hurt animals. It's about we have to do this cheaper. Now it's interesting you bring up the animal thing too, because PETA, which is like they're pretty
Yeah.
aggressive in terms of like
Oh,
if
yeah.
you kill a
Their
fly,
videos, oh
they're
my
coming
gosh.
after you. You know.
They'll be like crying. They'd be like, do you know what happens with McChickens or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So even PETA has come out to say they are in favor of cultured meat because ultimately it will
hear
not
that?
it will not
PETA.
affect animals, right? People decide to not eat meat for any number of reasons, whether it be animal cruelty, it could be health issues. Some people are actually allergic to meat. I mean, there's not a lot of people. I don't think I haven't seen the data on it, but I've maybe met 2 people in my life that have allergic reactions to meat. By and large, I would suspect that it has a lot to do with health issues.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, especially like you're saying the heart condition. I'm like, there's people in my family that I know that literally don't eat red meat specifically because they're like, I like staying alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even the way we produce meat now, I mean, so if you think again about a concentrated animal feedlot, those animals are pumped with all kinds of steroids and antibiotics that are, there's a lot of data out there that says it's not really a good way. It's not really particularly healthy for us to eat that kind of meat. So when the meat that I eat comes from a farm where the cows just hang out and eat grass like they're supposed to.
Yeah.
They're not pumped up with anything. So I'm getting probably the cleanest meat you can get. But that is also like I'm very fortunate that I can afford that. Not everybody can afford that. The promise of cultured meat is not only can we have cheaper meat, but cheaper, healthier meat.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like it's the greatest thing ever. No, I get very excited about it because it's. I think that one of the reasons I first really got excited about it was the fact that there are a lot of hungry people in this world.
Oh, for sure.
And overall, global hunger has decreased over the years, and I would say that is largely the result of capitalism. It's of free markets, enabling people to produce meat at scale, which wasn't possible 50 years ago. But we can do better because there are still a lot of people that are going hungry. Imagine that we have a lab that can pump out very, very cheap meat. And it doesn't have to be just meat either. It can be any number of it can be vegetables too. Because cellular agriculture in general can involve, again, using cells to make
this is just the
grains
first
and
stepstone,
plants.
like you said. Yeah, like you're just focusing on like beef right now or something, but it could
Right. And I focus mostly on the meat because that's where the money is. That's where we're seeing the most growth, and that's where these food producers make the lion's share of their money. So I love the idea of potentially, I can't say ending world hunger. I don't know if that's ever possible to do that. But rapidly seeing a decrease in world hunger. There are people in parts of Africa and India that will never know what it's like to eat a hamburger. And not because they're Hindu. It's because that they can't afford it. It's not available to them. But one day it will be. And that one day is not 100 years from now. That one day is 20, maybe 30 years away. So yeah, there's a lot of promise there. I mean, we're talking again about making it cheaper for these companies. Again, if we're just talking about the money, okay, which is why we're here, right?
Yeah.
We want to make money investing. If I'm going to invest in, a company that produces meat, and that company comes out tomorrow and says, guess what? We found a way to do exactly what we've been doing for the last 50 years, but we can do it at half the cost, which means our margins are going to just we're going to see margins like we've never seen before, right? Revenue is going to skyrocket. Profits are going to skyrocket. And so to me, like, that is the calling as an investor. As a person that does care about hungry people, I like the idea that we can feed a lot of people this way. And I say this a lot, and it's the result of capitalism being a catalyst for change. It's very easy to blame capitalism for the world's problems. But I can look at capitalism as, a solution to a lot of problems. And God, this is such a great example. The money that we invest in these companies today that are going to produce meat this way in 30 years, those companies are going to feed a lot of people that, previously wouldn't be able to eat at all.
Yeah.
So, that's my diatribe on why capitalism is good. But ultimately, I compare this cultivated meat to pretty much any major technology we've seen, in my lifetime and probably my parents' lifetimes too, whether it be modes of transportation, energy, tech. This is going to be it. So there are not a lot of public companies that you can invest in that are cultured meat companies. There are a couple that are doing interesting things, but as an investor, I need more than interesting things.
Yeah.
I need to know I'm going to make some money. And I'm not particularly bullish on a couple of these companies. I don't see them as particularly profitable, at least in the near term. But there are a couple of holding companies that have some really valuable IP, a lot of valuable private companies under their umbrella that are doing amazing work. And everything from, it could be meat, it could be fermentation, using microalgae to make oils and food additives. It's more than just cultured meat. It's just food tech in general that, again, going to bring down the cost of food, make it healthier for all of us. And then, of course, the companies that are providing the food make a lot more money. And as a shareholder, I, in turn, make money as well.
There we go. Right. I know so many positives, even especially like you said, it being cheaper to produce and better for you. Because you think if you go to the grocery store, when you're buying the cheaper thing, it's usually the thing that has the most preservatives and all the salt. And you're like, oh, I'm trying to save money because everything's expensive, but I also want to eat better. But everything that's organic or a plant is I don't know.
No, you're
right. Yeah. No, it's
100% accurate. It's 100% accurate. And it's always hard for me to talk about this too because, it kind of reminds me when I first started writing about electric vehicles, and this is before Tesla went public, and there were no highway-capable electric vehicles on the roads at all. And just bringing up the idea of an electric car was people would just get the hell out of here with that, hippie nonsense or whatever, But and for a long time, I mean, there really was no value to some of the companies that were making electric cars because they didn't fill a need that most people have. I need a car that's going to get me to work every day or to the store. I need to get on the highway. And, we're talking about a time when the electric vehicles that were on the market didn't go faster than 40 miles per hour. Your range was maybe 30 or 40 miles. I mean, that's cute, but there's no value to that.
Exactly. And then not having the proper charging places. It's okay, yeah, I have it at my house, but it's once I leave, there's where am I going to go? You have to look for spend actual time of your life being where do I go? And then sit there for hours.
There were not even charging stations around back then. You know? So again, I always thought it was very interesting, but I knew it was just listen, someone's got to come up with a better mousetrap or this is never going to happen. And that's what happened with Tesla and Elon Musk when I think it was 2007. I was speaking at a conference, an oil conference, and that was the first time I publicly talked about electric cars because I saw what Tesla was doing, and I saw that this company has a really nice car, highway capable car. It can go hundreds of miles on a single charge. It was really, really impressive, and then it just hit me. I'm like, this is going to happen. Like someone figured it out, and I was right, and we did invest in Tesla the second it went public, and it did very, very well. I there was a lot of pushback. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but at the time when Tesla first went public, I mean, there was maybe, I would say 90% of the analysts out there were just shitting on Tesla.
Oh, God.
They were just like, this is never going to work. They're going to run out of charge. You're never going to, I mean, and it was like a concerted effort against Elon Musk at the time.
Everyone's like, this idiot. And now here we are.
Right?
Sounds like one of the richest people ever. And it's just
the richest person,
yeah.
right? And then they had, I remember there was, I don't remember what magazine it was. I think it was maybe Car and Driver. But someone actually did a review of Tesla, and they took the vehicle out on the road, and then they take a picture of the vehicle on the back of a tow truck, and they say, yeah, it ran out of charge. This thing's useless. Well, Elon Musk is a smart guy, and he had like all kinds of sensors and stuff to tell him, like, it didn't run out of charge. You fucking lied. And it turned out that the guy did lie. He lied about the whole thing. So there was an actual concerted effort against Elon Musk, against Tesla, and against the idea of electric vehicles, because the companies that were making the vehicles, they didn't want to transition. Why would you want to do that? You have a good thing going. But when you build a better mousetrap, you can't keep it a secret, forever. Yeah. And I think really, although there are a number of electric vehicles on the market today, and on the roads today, there's no doubt that Elon Musk and Tesla are responsible for getting us to the beginning of that transition, which is happening. We are transitioning away from internal combustion. We've seen the data. I think it's 2040. By 2040, 50% of all new vehicles sold will be electric. That's a very big deal. So you're talking. So when Tesla went public, 2010, I believe. So we're talking within 30 years, we're going from not even 1% of vehicles on the market being electric, being sold, to 50%.
So when you say vehicles, do you mean just cars specifically, or like would it transition to like buses, like other forms of transportation?
It's a very good question. So for passenger vehicles, they're saying, the Bloomberg data is showing 50% all new car sales. So it doesn't mean 50% of all cars on the road are going to be electric, but 50% of all new car sales. So that's the growth that we're looking at. I don't really care about the car on the road that was bought 20 years ago, because I'm not going to make any money from that. I'm going to make money off the companies that are selling cars, every day, every year, going forward. It's interesting you bring up the buses though, because I love the promise of electric buses. Not again, just simply as an investor. Public transportation in the United States sucks. It's horrible.
Correct.
It's great in other parts of the world, but here it sucks. And and there's a reason for that. It was designed, at some point it was designed to fail. And there's a lot, this is not a conspiracy theory. There's a lot of data about this, and research has been done, talks about how the car companies helped dismantle the early trolley systems. And, I'm not going to, who cares? It's over. There's nothing you can do about it now. But buses are still used in our cities, regardless if they're shitty or not. I've been very fortunate. I've been on really nice buses in Switzerland, and they're fantastic. I take the bus in Baltimore, and it's always late. It smells like urine, and you never know if you're going to get shot on the thing, So it's not really something I'm really excited about taking,
No place like home. Love it here.
But the reality is, we will continue to use buses. And from the perspective of, how can I make the most money in the electric vehicle space? I love electric buses because these are sold not as like individual units. So for example, if I'm Tesla and I'm selling cars, okay, I'm selling you a Model S, I'm selling you a Model X, I'm selling you a Model 3, whatever. But if I'm selling electric buses, I'm selling them to municipalities that are going to buy 20, 30, 40 at a time. And they also include, when you talk about a bus, it's not an individual saying, I have to go get a loan to get this car. Like, individual governments have money set aside for public transportation. They have to use that money to buy buses or to maintain buses. So it's less of a sell in terms of like trying to convince people to go electric. If you talk to these cities and you look at the electric buses versus the conventional diesel buses, it's simply, bottom line, they are cheaper to operate and maintain. Over let's say a 10-year time span of an electric bus versus a diesel bus, you're going to save a fortune on not just fuel, okay? Which
true. Because I can imagine the amount of gas that it takes.
Right. Or diesel. I mean, diesels. I think I was in New York yesterday, and it was 5 something a gallon for diesel, which is really cheap if you compare it to what they pay in Europe. But those fluctuations make it difficult for municipalities because a lot of times they'll have to like prepay like, okay, we're going to buy this much fuel for the next 3 months, because it is a fleet and they can maintain the fleet. So that's an issue, the fluctuating price of oil. But also the maintenance costs. I mean, your brakes last longer. There are no oil changes. No spark plug issues. I mean, it's just an electric motor. There are so fewer moving parts in an electric motor than an internal combustion vehicle. So my point is, you are seeing municipalities buying electric buses at a much more rapid rate than individuals buying electric cars. Now, let's go back to what I said a little while ago. By 2040, 50% of all new car sales will be electric. Now, bump that up for electric buses because it's significantly higher. And then also, it's easier for so an interesting way to look at this is in the EU. So as you know, there's a big energy crisis in the EU.
Oh, yeah.
Petrol has always been very, very expensive there anyway. So I think it was in 2019, the EU had put together a regulatory protocol in place that essentially dictates that by, I believe, 2023, which is next year, 25% of all buses must be electric. But by 2030, it would be 30%. I don't know what the compound annual growth rate is on that. But essentially, the EU has determined every bus that we have will be an alternative fueled vehicle. Now, I'm not saying they're all going to be electric. Some might be hydrogen. There are actually some really interesting buses. They're kind of like trolley cars in Germany. But for the most part, they will be electric. So you have that happening in the EU. China has also have similar regulatory protocols in place. Individual states in this country have those. I know California does. I think Oregon, New York. I don't know what the percentages are, but they're in the double digits. So those regulatory protocols. I'm not saying I'm a fan of the government being involved, but I am a fan of making money. And if I know the government is dictating to these municipalities, you have to get electric buses, or at least buses that don't use fossil fuels. It's a guarantee. Like, I know they have to buy
it's
them.
like they have to spend their money on this. So
they do. And I look at alternative fuel buses. Electric wins out over hydrogen and biofuels just on cost alone, whether it's primarily on maintenance costs. So again, it's not rocket science. I'm like, okay, well, I know they have to buy these buses, and they have to buy the charging infrastructure. So who's going to sell it to them? And that's when you have to do the digging. There are plenty of Daimler makes electric buses. Geely in China makes electric buses. I'm trying to figure out who's the king, in this castle. Like, I know there's got to be one company that they have a strategic advantage over some of these other ones. And there's one company I really like, and I think we can put this I have a report that you can link.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
That talks about this company. But basically, they make the buses, they make the charging infrastructure, they make the batteries, they make all the components. They make everything.
Dang. Yeah, really.
Right.
They're like, got it. We don't need you. We got it all ourselves. Yeah.
So put yourself in the situation of the person that has to buy these vehicles. Say you work in Baltimore and you're like the person like, okay, you decide what we're going to buy. You have to make that decision. Well, if I have to monitor, I don't know, 500-600 buses, I want to make this as easy as possible, which means when I buy this, I don't want to have to go to one company to buy the bus, another company to buy the charging infrastructure, another company to buy the components.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a lot. Too many people to talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This company does it all, and they do it in a way that's cost competitive with all the other companies. So it's going to take way too long to get involved in how they make the batteries, why their batteries are superior, why the charging infrastructure is superior, and why the buses themselves are superior. But I put all that in that
cool.
report. But yeah, buses are really fascinating because we don't really think about that. Again, I think this is something that investors don't think about when we talk about electric vehicles. They immediately go, Tesla, or like GM has a new one, or Nissan, or whatever it may be. But the money's in the buses right now.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, especially like you said, like even if it's not the best, like we still have buses everywhere. One almost drove me off the road today driving to work. Yeah, so
that'll happen.
I know.
That'll
I'm like,
happen.
Don't hurt me. But yeah.
And I have to also point out too that like in terms of there are a number of electric bus companies. There's probably I'd say more than a dozen right now that actively have contracts with different municipalities, but only a few are global. And to me, that's a big advantage too, because again, not to beat a dead horse, but this particular company saw the resource supply crunch happening a few years ago and bought in advance. So while some of these other companies are out there trying to figure out how to get their hands on more lithium or more, I don't know, I didn't sleep well last night. Any number of the other components, that are used to make, whether it be silver, I'm trying to think of the other.
I don't know. Copper, uranium.
Copper,
I'm
no,
just
not
thinking of-
uranium. Copper.
I have no idea. I'm just thinking
This
of
is really
periodic
embarrassing
table.
that I don't even know this. I do know it, but I'm very, very tired.
It's fine.
Anyway, because I did drive straight down here from New York.
Yeah.
The point is,
cut him some slack, guys.
yeah, please cut me some slack. The point is, I like how this company operates because they're global. They're smart enough to know that they need these resources, and they were smart enough to know it years ago. Again, while people weren't paying attention, when people weren't looking at the mandates from these individual governments and realizing that it's much easier to sell 30 buses than it is to sell 30 Tesla Model X's. And by the way, the margins on those buses are significantly better than the individual vehicles. So very, very, very bullish on electric buses. And I probably will be, I would say at least for the next probably 8 to 10 years. There's bus fleets are being transitioned as we speak, and there are a lot of bus fleets all across the world. And I want to be in the company that's supplying them all.
Yeah, you're like,
and the batteries and the infrastructure and the components. Because to me, that's a long-term play. That's kind of like a Tesla play too. When Tesla first came out, they were the only game in town. This bus company is not the only game in town, but they're the only one that really matters.
Yeah, the one that seems to have the advantage too. And yeah, dang. Looks like you've done your due diligence, and that I appreciate, because I'm always lost in the sauce.
I love this stuff though. Like, that's why I think that I've been very successful in this, whether you look at electric vehicles or food tech or renewable energy. We made a lot of money in solar when the solar boom happened back in 2006, and it's not because I'm just looking for good investment opportunities, because I'm passionate about this stuff. I seriously, I would rather go to a cultured meat lab and hang out with a bunch of scientists explaining to me how this stuff works than, to go to a concert and have beers with my friends. I'm that kind of nerd.
Oh my gosh, yeah, especially to a concert. I'm like, oh,
I
do
know.
both. Get
No.
lab of the day, concert at night. So.
No. I just want to hang out in a lab with all these scientists and just let them school me, you know?
You're just taking notes. It's like, tell me more. I'm so interested.
I am interested, but I have to be honest. I'm I'm also looking for a way to make money.
Yeah.
So, and that's the interesting thing too, is that's when you find out who's legit and who's not. Because if someone has something that's legit and it's going to work, they don't have to sell you on it. They just show it to you.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I've seen these buses, and I've talked to management, and they've never tried to, they've never done anything to, try to get me to buy into all the hype. They don't need to.
Yeah, they're look at this cool stuff we have. We got this cool stuff. You're more than welcome to be a part of it, but they're not trying to be all flashy. Oh,
well, I can even tell you right now. So, I kept this up because I thought I might have to look at it. So this particular company had a 27% increase in total revenue year over year for Q2. This is a time when every company is shitting the bed.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And this company is still making money. The stock is doing great. So that's you don't need to show me anything flashy. Just show me how much money you're making and what the sales projections look like.
Yeah, show me the numbers.
I think we're looking at 52 electric buses were delivered. They have more than $500 million in cash and cash and equivalents. Again, you can click the link at the bottom and see. Here it is. I wanted to tell you about the compound annual growth rate for electric buses. 2022 to 2029 is 43.2%. 43.2% compound annual growth rate for electric buses.
That's insane.
That is significantly higher than for passenger vehicles. So tell me where you're going to put your money.
Yeah.
Boom.
Guys. Yeah. How do you like that? You hear that? Nice. Oh my God. Wow. This has been so informational. Oh my God. I'm get me out of here so I can read this report. But anything else you want to add about either food tech or EVs or e-buses?
E-buses. I think the one thing I always want to just remind investors is don't be afraid of progress. Don't be afraid of technology. That's, if you think about the wealthiest people today, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, like these guys, they made money because they did something before anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to be like Elon Musk or Jeff. I'm not even close to smart as those guys, but I'm smart enough to know who to follow and who not to, and if I again, early investor in Amazon, early investor in Tesla, just see what the smart people are doing and do what they're doing.
There we go. That sounds like the plan. Yeah. I feel like I'm just going to follow the intelligent ones.
And, and just let me point out too, Jeff Bezos, I don't know if I have a whole list here, but Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates again, Elon Musk, these guys have invested millions in cultured meat.
Oh, there you have it.
And they're not talking about it. They're not writing about it.
Yeah, because they're just like quietly just like making money. And then they're like, oh, by the way, I actually own the entire planet now. So, yeah.
Well, even before I was saying too, like Cargill, ADM, Yum Brands, like all the big ag tech companies, all the big, like let's say big ag, they're all investing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned that earlier. So if the people that would be like the like kind of competitors, I guess, in a way, and not even competitors, but I guess kind of like already in the game, they're like, oh, like this is clearly the future. Like
someone showed up at their door and they said, I found a way to help you do this cheaper and more efficiently. And we can prove it. And they proved it. And that's why they're investing in it.
Yeah.
So
clearly,
it is funny because sometimes people will say, well, the big food production companies will never let this happen. I'm like, they're funding it.
Yeah, they're like, please help us save money and make things easier.
I have literally gone to financing events for some of these companies, and I know the people that are there that are from ADM.
There you go.
And from Cargill. They're there. They're not there because they're bored. You
Yeah.
know? They're there because like
oh,
this is the future and this is how they're
out.
going to make more money. And you know what? Might as well make it with them.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, for real. Join them. Ride the wave of that. Dang, yeah. Well, there you have it. Jeff, thank you so much again for joining for this podcast.
Thank you for
like
having
you
me.
said, check the description for the access to the report because everyone here wants to make more money. So I feel like
Why
this is
wouldn't
definitely
you?
Yeah, literally. Come on. Is the sun hot? Yes. Do you want to make more money? Also, yes. But yeah, we'll make sure to tune in next week. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment your favorite. Do you like beef? Would you eat cultured meat? Or
I would love to see that. Can
yeah,
we do
right?
that?
Yeah. Would you eat this? If right?
Do you think we could do that? Put like I would be very curious to know what people think. Would they be interested in trying it?
Yeah. Okay. If we were to invite you to a backyard barbecue and it was only
Yes.
cultured meat, would you go and would you eat the food?
Do you know I could
Comment
probably
below.
make that happen?
You should.
I mean,
I'll
I could
go.
definitely, like, I know enough people that, I mean, it would have to be a small number because it's still quite expensive to make it, but, maybe I could bring some people in and let some of our readers try it.
And me. As long
Of
as I can go.
course.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Well, there we go. Comment below. Please say yes, because that'd be so cool.
Awesome.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.